Philip Stoughton from My Home to Yours. Welcome to EMS at Sea Level. Today I'm with Didrik Bech from Elmatica. Didrik, great to see you again. Last time we chatted, it was on our Made in Europe show. Today I want to kind of dig a bit deeper into what you do. So let's start with a little bit of an introduction to Didrik and to Elmatica.
I've been working at Elmatica for 10 years. I started my career actually in PR and marketing, and before that actually real estate, and then accounting, and came to the world of electronics. I don't think many people who ends up in electronics thought that they would end up there, but I think it's a very interesting market. So I came to Elmatica. That's exactly 10 years and 2 days ago. Yeah, time flies.
Okay.
I'm still consider myself
happy anniversary.
Oh, thank you. Actually, I didn't get a gift, so I need to talk to our communication department. So I came here and started in the world of PCB. Elmatica was established in 1971, and as far as I know, we're the oldest, what we call ourselves now, broker in the world. We started out actually with design, and which I believe is also your background, Phil. Designing PCBs, and after a while we also made actually a small EMS. We had some, made it at home in the home mom and dad shop, if you want to call it that. Then actually we owned our own factory in approximately 1983, Elmatica, which we had for some years. And then we started what I call brokering. People have different names for it, but as I've learned, if you don't put anything on stock, which you can sell to different people, then it's actually called brokering, which means we are the customer's advanced hand, or you might say the supplier's hand or support, which are bridging the gap and bringing two people together. And we focus on, we have how can I put the global supply base. So we have suppliers in the United States, in Canada, in Japan, South Korea, China, of course, also to Thailand in the past, in Taiwan, England, Czechoslovakia, Italy, all over the place. A little bit depending actually on what the customer wants. We see, when you go back 50 years, you had 2 laminates. Now we have over 254 in our database, which means you need more suppliers and also special capabilities. So that's changed a lot. So that's a short background.
And it's changed hugely in terms of not just the laminates, but approvals, designs, all kinds of things. Talk me through your journey with respect to COVID, because I think you were there at ground zero when it all started.
Yes, we were lucky to be in Wuhan. Actually, remember visiting the world's oldest still operational copper mine. Which was I'm a big fan of copper, actually. So I like to look at the mines and stuff like that. So we were there, and it was the 1st of December 2019, visiting one of our manufacturing partners in Wuhan. Of course, at that time we did not know that it was COVID on the loose, but we took the trains and went to local markets, everything, and finally, luckily, we were fine. And came home, and I remember I was calling. I give blood every quarter, and I called them and said, I've been to Wuhan. Can I give blood? And they were like, yes, of course you can. I'm like, are you sure? I said, I'll call you back in a couple of weeks. And I called again. They said, yes, you can. A couple of weeks later, they were like, no, you leave it. So actually, we had our first COVID meeting here at our company in early January 2020, and we were actually just waiting for what would happen. Of course, we know, or perhaps as few people know, it's actually on a regular basis, I believe, 5 pandemics every 10 years. And it was statistical-wise just a matter of time before one would also hit Europe. I mean, you have the swine flu, you have the bird flu, and then you have COVID, and you have Ebola. So it's like this is, as we're growing and things are going quicker and quicker, this was something actually we were just waiting to happen. So our company has been, not exactly for this, but been prepared for many years. We're working on a global scale. Everything is, I would say, optimized, and we work on cloud-based solutions. So for us to work from home, it was no challenge. Of course, the challenge is that sometimes it's nice to meet our customers face-to-face, and also there are certain projects which are confidential or top secret, which then we cannot receive the files and so on, then it's nice to be there and go through the different questions and so on in their facilities. So of course there'll be some hindrance, but we've focused a lot this time actually on trying to keep the mental health of our colleagues. So
that's huge.
I've been pushed by our communication department to do different stunts. So I've been dressing up like a monkey, traveling around, giving out, of course, keeping the distance, staying with the parameters, but doing things and sending flowers and so on. So, and also been quite keen on that we had to call somebody, not to talk business, but just call to say, how are you?
How are you doing?
Yes, because you lose out on the human factor, and also, of course, you lose the talk around the coffee machine and hearing how people are. And I personally, as a leader, not a boss, I don't like the word boss. I like to have the opportunity or the honor to lead. It's mental health of one colleagues is an extremely important part. I know not all the leaders focus on that, but if you are mentally, how can I put, in a good spot, then you will also perform better at work. So,
and you don't want anxiety in the team. But going back to when it first broke out, I think it's interesting in terms of the timing, because when I look at supply chain in January, we're all thinking about what's going on in China. We're planning for Chinese New Year, and we're planning for this kind of 2 weeks of supply chain disruption. And last year it went from 2 weeks to, I don't know, maybe it's going to be 2 years. I don't know how long it's going to be. But where do you think did you feel like you were in a good spot in terms of being ready for that disruption?
I would say that, of course, this is my subjective opinion. We were in a very good spot because of our global database and the partnerships lasting for the last 15, 20 years. It was easy for us to, for example, we had a huge focus in February, March, April last year, where we spoke to all our manufacturing partners within specifically the medical industry. So we made a fast track. So if it was a medical order, it went through and it got first priority on all the global manufacturers. And I think a lot of, not only us, a lot of our also both competitors and partners and also other industries did the same, which means we told them if it's medical, it's going to go first. So that was one thing in one way in which we're prepared. And also with our structure method and with our focus on cybersecurity, it just actually meant that people were working from home. I must admit I was at the office a little bit more. I believe that the one who's the captain of the ship should be at the steering wheel.
Should be on board.
Yes. So I had a lot of time by myself. And of course, working from home again with 3 children and 2 dogs is, how can I put it, not always optimal. So, and of course, we also had to teach our own kids at that time. So it was homeschooling also. So I think we're all going through some challenging times. So I do hope that things will improve. But we were ready. We actually started this in 2012. So, and I like to try and prepare for the more unlikely aspects in life, because sometimes some of them it's not a big cost, but it's just if it happens, it can have a huge consequence.
And I think what's interesting when I look at your business as a broker is when you compare the challenges your customers were facing to the challenges customers were facing if they were dependent on a single factory. So, there's a scenario where if I'm buying from a single factory in Wuhan, for example, and that factory is closed because everybody's on stay-at-home orders, then I've got to go and find another source, and that's a big challenge. I assume if I'm working with a company like Elmatica, that if one of my sources is having problems, you've got all my files, you've got everything ready, and you're ready to switch me across to another. Is that the case? And is that something that made your customers feel better about, kind of being with you during this particular crisis?
I hope so. Of course, it's difficult for me to answer on behalf of our customers, but what I do know is that we have our own developed IT systems, and I think it's actually the most, as far as I know of all the others, it's the most advanced in the world, which means we can pull up any board and know exactly any manufacturer can produce it. It's optimized. So we run an article through our system, dissects it into 113, 130, depending on what type of board characteristics. And then we can automatically capability test it with any manufacturer and also the statistics of that manufacturing partner. And we've audited all of them ourselves, so we know exactly what they can do and cannot do and have the quality history. And also, for like a couple of years ago, when we looked for new manufacturer, we looked at 100 manufacturers and decided on one. So I always find it, how can I put it, a little bit special when somebody can go online and find somebody in China and say they're great. Yeah. And I like to ask them then, but have you done the audit? Do they have the ISO? How are they treating the water? Do they have child labor? No, it states online that everything is fine. I'm not talking only about China in this respect. It could be any country for that sake.
Yeah.
Like, okay. And with all the focus on the environment and the ESG and so on, I'm sometimes wondering how good compliance setup those companies have.
Yeah.
But at least what we know is that those who come to us, that those elements are under control.
Yeah.
So of course that means that I would say, to my surprise, we have actually got quite a lot of new customers during COVID. And
that doesn't surprise me.
Our existing customers have also grown. So if I had to make a bet in 2019, December, what would happen in 2020 and 21, I can only guarantee one thing: I would have been completely wrong.
Yeah.
I wasn't exactly. I was expecting something to happen. Actually, I remember I was in a meeting with Solner, and they said in 2016 that the last good year will be 2019. And they were surprising. They were quite correct, but I wasn't expecting this. I was expecting you could actually see that the manufacturing was going down in 2019. And then 20 came, and everybody wanted to buy the PCBs early before they closed in China. And then we were sitting, I remember, the 1st of April 2020 and saying, look at what will happen with orders now. And from one day to the other, I mean, literally straight down. Then you had April, May, June, and then suddenly a little bit more alive in July and August. And from there on out, it's gone, I would practically say, sky high.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's been the strangest marketing dynamic or market dynamic. And, I guess the underlying trends in the industry were good. There's more and more demand for PCBs as you get to, more and more electronics in EVs and in cars, more and more electronics in the medical sector. So, there's plenty of opportunity there. And I think what the crisis has done, in the same way the trade war did, in the same way the current shortages is doing, is making people think, well, how can I secure my supply chain? How can I be working with a supply chain that's robust and agile and adaptable all at the same time? And the way to do that seems to be quite often to work with a manufacturing partner, so they can kind of, connect all the dots and they can see the whole market. You mentioned ESG, which is really interesting, the whole sustainability issue. How important is that to your customers at the moment? And are they asking you for that, or are you telling them you're doing that? Who's kind of leading that debate?
I would say that actually we are leading the debate. It's since the PCB is such a minute part of a product, they are most likely focusing on the total aspect of the product. But we've started a couple of years ago receiving the CO2 emission, for example, on transportation, let's say, for example, from DHL. And one of our next projects now is actually in our new system, which we made, which we called Circuit Data Profiler, where you can, instead of going from 113 characters or 30, we can go to 1,800 characters per board, which means that we can break up the boards in a different way. So we can find out and start calculating what is actually the CO2 emission per board, which means the future is about calculating, for example, you want gold finish, and we can say with gold finish, I'm just giving some random numbers. The CO2 emission on this board is 1.2 grams per produced board. But if you go to silver, it's going to be 1.1. So we would like our customers to understand when they are designing, when they're running it through our system, what the CO2 emission will be. And there's no current system for this in the world. That's why we created a database to handle it. But once this is done, the second step, which I think is equally interesting, is then starting to give a CO2 rating also on the manufacturing partner, which means that when you see a board, you can say, this is my board. It has this CO2 emission. If I do these changes, it will decrease. And if I choose this manufacturer, which is more expensive, they have a lower CO2 emission, and this one is less expensive. And then it's, but it's also even lower price, which means it will be interesting to see when people are offered opportunity to see, because it will be like this. You pay more, you get less CO2 emission. And of course, we know that the governments are coming behind us with the rules, so we would like to be one on the forefront, which means also working actively with IPC to make sure that we get some kind of standard, so we can, we don't want to own the standard, we want to share our knowledge with the industry and make sure that we have something we can work on together, because this is not a challenge we can solve separately. We can only, if we can, solve it together.
Yeah, and sustainability only works when it's a completely holistic approach. So, you know, when you look at your suppliers of printed circuit boards, they have to look at their suppliers of laminate, and those people have to look at their supplies of copper and fiberglass and sand and all those things. But I think what's interesting when you look at your business is to actually look at the supply chain as well. So will you be giving them, you know, the kind of different CO2 emission ratings for different batches, different methods of transport, different speeds of delivery?
Yes, it will be both for transportation. Actually, it will be kind of like three things. It will be one CO2 emission for transportation, one is for the board, how you designed it, and the second and the third will be actually for the manufacturer. And then they can choose, and it can be some kind of score system. So it means, I mean, the next step would of course naturally be that last year with your orders, you ended up with I'm just saying something, average score of 55. But your possibility was to reduce it to 44 if you've done the changes. But of course, sometimes you go finish instead and so on. So, but at least we can give people option. But right now, people have no options. ESG is getting in every boardroom, and the customers are focusing on it. And I mean, personally, when I go and buy something, I look at it, where is it produced? And what I would like is actually to scan it and see, did those workers, for example, in Bangladesh, were they paid a proper wage?
Like and were they saved?
Yes, and honestly, then I'm willing to pay more. Because it's, as I'm teaching my children, like, you don't need that much. Like when I buy a pair of shoes for the summer, I wear those shoes until they're, you know, worn out. I don't need 3 pairs. I'm not that fancy either. You just look at my very simple shirt today. But it's... I think I would rather spend it on good home, on food, put it that way. But we're all different. I'm not judging anybody.
Yeah, no, and I think it's important to have that visibility. And I think that's what you can do in your position in the industry, because you are connected to so many suppliers and so many customers. You can be that conduit of information, and you can share best practices. And, you know, and if you've got a vendor that is particularly poorly performing in terms of CO2, then maybe part of your role is to actually advise them and help them improve, rather than just say, don't use this one because they've got too high emissions. So I think the relationship you have with your manufacturing partners is quite critical to your business as well. Tell me a bit about how you select them and how you audit them, and kind of how long that relationship lasts.
Yes, well, thank you. We have a 10-step process to become approved, which usually starts either we have a specific customer demand which requires new manufacturer. If that is the case, then we're talking about something which we call extremely advanced. Extremely advanced does not mean 16 or 20 layer board. Then we're talking about a combination of a Rigiflex 30 or layers, or something extremely special, which very few. It's quite seldom we bring in new supplier. However, there are certain cases when there might be more standard technology because of price, but also a combination of price, quality, ESG, and so on. So then we have 10 steps, and then we have a separate department, which we call the technical department, which are responsible for all the audits. And we also document everything, which means when our customer or partner would like us to like to see what we're doing, we're sharing everything. Because transparency is our key value. That means we're open and accountable as to what we add. And we always ask ourselves, are we being transparent now? Yes or no. If we're not, then we have to improve, which means we also then always inform exactly where we're producing. We give them access to all the data, all the working Gerber. It is not our information, it is our customers' information. We're just there to protect and secure it.
Yeah.
That's the important thing. We should know our role and what we, so if they would like to choose somebody else not work with us, that is of course their their rights. So after the 10 steps, we start with the first one, of course, NDAs and all the paperwork and so on. Yeah. And then we go for the first initial audits. We go for the first initial meetings, seeing, just to put it gently, with some of our esteemed colleagues, they can go into manufacture and quickly turn around. I would say that when we look into 100, 50 are gone automatically just by,
just on the first visit.
Yeah. Yes, and then we might visit a physical visit with 20 of them, and half of them just by walking in the front door, we turn around again for different reasons. Yeah. I would also like them to state that the people we're sending, they've visited hundreds and hundreds of different manufacturers over the last 50 years, and also had literally thousands of audits. So they are, I trust them in their judgment. And then after the first initial, if everything looks fine, then they have the right setup, they can prove all the right documentation and so on. Then we have some secrets we don't like to share how we do it, but we have a very specific process, which we've done many times, which allows us very quickly to understand what level they're on. The only thing I can say is that I would call it, we're doing a live audit, which means that we are not like some people that said, can you produce these 4 boards for us, for example? And if people cannot produce 4 boards perfectly when you're placing a specific order, then you should be really worried. So we learned a long time ago, that's not the way to check. But of course, those who are not that, how can I put it, experienced with auditing PCB manufacturers, they will be typically focusing on the typical ISO audit and so on, and going out the fire extinguishers to the right place and so on. We are specialists, we have 7 people here alone, over 15% of the company, which have owned their own PCB plant. Wow. So we go into the process, what we call process control, and really check what are they doing, how are they following up, what kind of routines do they have, and checking the paperwork. And to do so, I would say you need at least 15, 20 years experience working at PCB plant on a top level. Yeah. So then you know what to look for. So if those things are fine again, then we go for the next audit, and then it's even more paperwork. And looking to the structure, we also would like to know what our manufacturing partner would like to sell. Because, if in a factory, let's say you can produce a 30 layer, you can also produce a 2 layer, but it doesn't mean you want to sell a 2 layer. Yeah. So we need to understand, what do they want to produce, what would they like to sell, and what is their focus for the future. And once we can align their interests with our interests and agree on how we can cooperate, then we start a cooperation. That means by slowly evolving it, and which usually takes, I would say, at least another 2-3 years of slowly working together, getting to know each other. And even though we are the customer in this case, I would say respect goes both ways in any kind of relationship. Yeah. So it's also for us to show that we are a worthy customer of them, and that they're a worthy supplier of us.
It's building that trusted, open partnership, isn't it? And as you say, I think what's really important is finding their sweet spot. So you are giving them the business they want to do, not the business they feel they have to do to keep you happy.
That's correct.
So there's a very strong element of that. Going forward, where do you see your key opportunities for growth, your key areas for development in the business, without giving away trade secrets and your big plans?
Yes, no, thank you. It's first of all, we're focusing on what we call cybersecurity and compliance. But compliance is not necessarily just the defense; it's in all aspects, documenting and proving to our customers what we're doing. and back to word transparency. Besides that, we're focusing more and more specifically on industries. Specifically, again, we're one of the biggest in at least Scandinavia, in the defense industry. We're focusing very hard on the telecommunication industry, in industries which has demands and compliance which really are, how can I put it, even more experienced, perhaps professional, knowing what they want and knowing what to ask for. And we like to say, the more experienced the customer is, the more guaranteed they're going to work with us.
Yeah.
I think this is our humble experience for the last 50 years.
Yeah.
So, and also the medical industry, we have a lot of, so the more advanced it is, the more advanced the product, the more we can contribute and the more value we believe we can create. We have a department of 10 people working solely with the design for our customers for free. But this, but the free for free, it's the same time, not a free lunch in the world. Like we contribute with, it might be hundreds of hours, and then we would like the opportunity to maybe they can consider us their partners. We believe in investing first, and then they can determine if we have the value they require. And if they do, then I hope we can have a healthy and profitable relationship for both parties, and everything goes both ways in life.
Yeah, well, that's karma, isn't it? What goes around comes around. You put in the hard yards at the beginning, and hopefully you get the long-term partnership. And when I look at that successful brokerage model, that deep domain knowledge, those really well thought out long-term partnerships are the key to your success. When you look at areas like medical or like automotive, do you have kind of tiger teams that are specialists in those industries? How do you kind of build and develop industry knowledge for your customers' markets, as well as the knowledge you have of the PCB process?
Yes, it's kind of interesting. One of the first things I learned when I came to Elmatica 10 years ago is that if it's a 60 layer for, let's say, medical or telecommunication, it's still a 60 layer. It's not that different, put it that way. So of course there are some, it was more in the past, very specific requirements. We do have a Jan Pedersen at Elmatica, which is just came up with a new addendum for medical, where they have some specific requirements and so on. But it's I would say it's more like the documentation part of it. For example, DFM reports for the automotive industry and the PEPAP for the automotive industry and so on. They have some, so it's more, I would say it's more the paper part of it. But at the same time, we see, I would say it's more like how technology is changing in regard to size or energy or copper. So you might have an antenna system which require, but the antenna system is the same principle if you have that for the telecommunication or medical or for let's say a marine installation. So technology, we don't have tiger teams. We have people who possess the knowledge about PCB, which works across industries, but then we have salespeople and procurement which work in regard to the specific demands, paper demands. Documentation demands, and
compliance.
Only who has a separate department for IT, which is programmers, which work to program the solutions which that specifically in specific industry requires.
Yeah, and in the time you've been there, how much digital transformation have you seen in terms of the processes, in terms of I don't know whether you're using any artificial intelligence or you're relying on human intelligence, what level of machine learning, how is that changing in the way you do business?
Very good question. It's at Elmatica, it has changed a lot, but I have learned with age. I'm over 40 now, under 50, but turning actually my birthday is next week. So I think takes a lot more time than I thought when I was young. So at Elmatica, we've gone from, we had a quite good system in the old days, but we've gone from a little bit of Excel sheets and how can I put it, a system supporting us to practically, I wouldn't say it's optimized, but it's getting more and more completely optimized. And I know that a lot of our very good competitors, they are still operating in Excel sheets. And I kind of like to say to some people, like, do you trust an Excel sheet where you add in different things and it shows you which manufacturer to use? But for us, where transparency is very important, we cannot work like that. And no disrespect intended, but so we have done a lot, but we discovered that the main challenge is still sharing the data. Because if we might call it, there's on a PCB, one thing which have different names. One might call it final finish, one might call it finish. And if it's not the same word, how can you share it between the systems? Then you need AI in the middle. And what is actually AI? AI is still an Excel sheet. When you mean autonomous AI, that still doesn't exist. So what an AI does, it actually just calculates probability. And we've been doing that for a long time. We have over 420,000 quotations in our system with 130 characters, or up to 130. So by just pressing a button, we can know exactly any price level according to country, customer, industry, and so on. So that's also AI, if you want to call that, or business intelligence.
Which is business intelligence, which is more important. And so I think that whole digital transformation is fascinating. I mean, the important thing is that you have some kind of automation that doesn't rely on people manually entering stuff and doesn't have risk, but also provides your customer with the level of traceability they need. And I think when you look to the future, that traceability is going to become even more and more demanding. People are going to need traceability on those sustainable issues that you mentioned, on kind of CO2 emissions. They're going to need it on all kinds of stuff, because everything that goes on in the supply chain reflects on the brand where the final product is going. So having that data in place is hugely important. Didrik, thank you so much for your time. Great to talk to you. Happy anniversary for 2 days ago. Happy birthday for next week. And I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Phil. Have a nice day.